Okay, welcome everyone to Chapter 3, Understanding Leadership Styles. In this lecture, we're going to be looking at some classic leadership philosophies, leadership styles, and styles of followers. So now we're looking at the study guide questions. You can see in our study guide questions that we're looking at theories X, Y, and Z. You may recall these theories from another class at JSOM as they're pretty famous. They must be pretty important if multiple courses are touching on them, right? Besides knowing the three theories, you'll want to see how these philosophies impact communication and leadership styles. Next, you'll want to know the three leadership styles and the positives and negatives of each one. Finally, we will be covering follower styles. Note that this information isn't in the book, so you'll want to take good notes on this testable material. So, why does leadership style matter? Let's begin with this question. It's important to know your leadership style and leadership philosophy because it impacts your communication with others. In turn, your communication plays a role in how others respond to you and their work, thus affecting your effectiveness as a leader. Understanding how your viewpoint of how people work and how they should be led can help you identify your approach's strengths and potential weaknesses as a leader. Additionally, if you understand leadership styles as a follower, you can anticipate the expectations and behaviors of your leader, and that can make you more effective in your communication. Your leadership communication is rooted in your leadership philosophy, meaning your beliefs about human nature and the nature of work. So that's what your leadership philosophy is. Douglas McGregor, the scholar who proposed theories X and Y, explained that the leader's assumptions of how followers viewed work and were motivated impacted how a person led their followers. Our textbook covers theories X and Y quite well, so I'll review them briefly in the next few slides. A leader who has a theory X philosophy assumes that the average person dislikes work and will avoid it if given the chance. Because of that, people need to be directed and controlled. Without external direction or controls, people won't work. People want security, not responsibility. Workers want their leaders to take care of them and protect them. They want their leaders to set the goals. If a leader has this philosophy towards their followers, they see it as their role to motivate followers and take on a lot of responsibility because they believe A, things won't get done without the leader motivating and monitoring their followers, and B, people want direction and need leadership. In this theory, that means the leader plays a large role in getting others to do their work. That means a leader must take on a lot of responsibility for the followers' actions. The emphasis is on task supervision. For instance, a workplace with an assembly line would be a good example of where Theory X could be effective. This is a repetitive job where there is a need for quality consistency. Because it's a little boring, people might not like the work or feel invested in it, so the leader should incentivize them to focus on the task. Conversely, Theory Y assumes that people like work. They see it as satisfying and enjoy accomplishing things. People are self-motivated, meaning leaders don't have to motivate people because they are committed to the work objectives. People accept and seek responsibility. If they have the opportunity, people will be productive and they'll take on responsibilities. With this philosophy, a Theory Y leader doesn't serve as a taskmaster as much. The followers take on the responsibility willingly and are self-directed. In Theory Y, the focus is on the individual and their commitment level. The tasks are not ignored, but viewed in terms of the people involved. Where in Theory X, the focus is on the task. So Theory X and Theory Y are not polar opposites. These two descriptions make them sound like they might be polar opposites. Either people are lazy or motivated. You have to watch them like crazy or trust them completely. That's a common criticism of the theories. McGregor, the creator of the theories, emphasized that people should view them not as opposites but as options a leader can choose depending on the situation and people involved. This is important because it recognizes the role of situation and followers in leadership communication. So these options are on a spectrum and a leader should be prepared to adjust the approach if needed. This is called the contingent theory of leadership. So take notes if you're taking notes. I find to think about myself as a follower when thinking about these two theories. So, for instance, I find my job quite satisfying. I enjoy research and teaching. I love getting to know my students. My superior doesn't have to motivate me because I like the responsibilities I have and enjoy perfecting a lecture or improving how a class is laid out. Conversely, there are parts of my job where I'm not as self-motivated and maybe I need a little push from a superior to get a report completed or something like that. I'm not a theory Y follower all of the time. It depends on the situation. Sometimes I need to be motivated with a threat of a deadline or a goal from a superior that I wouldn't set for myself. Take a second and think about how you operate as a follower. Do you see how you can align with both theory X and theory Y? Now we're going to take a look at theory Z, which William Ouchi developed, I don't know how to pronounce it, Ouchi, developed in the late 1970s, early 1980s. In the 1980s, a trend appeared where American consumers were purchasing a lot of Japanese products, like electronics and televisions. In particular, Japanese cars were in hot demand. Why? 2 reasons: high quality and low prices. This led to research comparing Japanese and American companies, and thus Theory Z emerged. Japan was known for high productivity and enthusiasm for work. I think it's Ouchi, because it would be Japanese, said this was because of the management style. While American companies tended to be individualistic, Japanese companies were collectivistic. You can see the collectivistic approaches in the assumptions. A Theory Z leadership philosophy holds 3 assumptions. 1, people want to be happy and have close relationships with coworkers. People desire affiliation. 2, people want to be supported by the company. People want work-life balance and value a company that understands that. This could be through vacation or leave policies, the strong company culture, long-term development, and consensus in decision-making. People can be trusted. Given the right management support, workers can be trusted to do their jobs and support others. The idea behind Theory Z is to have a stable work environment that produces high morale and productivity. Leaders have the power to increase job satisfaction, which can lead to increased productivity. Theory Z cultures involve things like strong company philosophy and culture, which is understood by everyone, long-term development and employment, job security, clear understanding of how promotions work, training opportunities, collective responsibility, collective decision-making. Employees are encouraged to participate in decision-making. Because employees have lots of responsibility and are involved in decisions, they rotate through jobs and get training in other areas, so they know the company better. The company values employee happiness and well-being and reflects that in programs to help. While there are formal measures to assess performance, management is hands-off because employees are empowered to work. Individual responsibility and contributions are recognized, but in the context of the collective whole team. Theory Z has a focus on long-term employment and gives people responsibility and accountability. However, it might not be the best fit for all companies. It can be difficult for employers and employees to make long-term commitments, and collective decision-making takes time and can be a poor fit depending on the situation or industry. The heart of this theory is about organizational culture. If an organization wants to operate under a Theory Z philosophy, it's more of a cultural shift rather than the choice of an individual manager. So a quick activity. Now that we've covered leadership philosophies, we're going to think about leadership styles. Before that move, let's take a break with a short activity. Think about people you've been led by in the past, like a boss, a teacher, a coach, a club leader. You probably enjoyed working with some more than others. Some you might have been more productive with and accomplished a lot, others not so much. What do you think contributed to their effectiveness as a leader? Name qualities or behaviors. How did they lead? Probably one contributing factor is leadership style, which is what we're going to talk about next. A leadership style is the behaviors of leaders, focusing on what leaders do and how they act. Leadership philosophies inform leadership styles because your perceptions of followers and your role as a leader greatly impact your behavior or style as a leader. The book touches on 3 classic leadership styles most commonly associated with theories X and Y: Authoritarian, Democratic, and Laissez-Faire. We are focusing on theories X and Y here and not theory Z because Z is more tied to organizational culture than individual leadership styles. You've probably heard of these leadership styles before. I think I first learned about them in a high school government class and heard about them again in a number of college classes. It's important to know these styles if you haven't learned them yet, because they are common knowledge in the business world. People might not identify a leader and say, they're so laissez-faire, but people do like to analyze leadership styles, and it helps to understand them from this perspective. The book explains these styles well, so I'm going to do a quick overview and provide some examples. An authoritarian leader thinks followers need direction. Sounds a lot like Theory X, right? Ding, ding, ding! That philosophy informs this style. These leaders believe followers wouldn't function well without direct supervision. So an authoritarian leader determines tasks and procedures and tries exerting influence and control over the group members. Oftentimes, you'll see this control by creating boundaries. They'll create distance between themselves and followers to emphasize role distinction and to try to communicate to the leader rather than try to direct communication to the leader rather than communication among coworkers. This leadership style on its face doesn't sound great, but it does have positives. This leadership style is efficient and productive. Think about it in terms of a police officer directing traffic. They need to be assertive, keep everyone focused on a task, and have the role of a leader. There's no time for chit-chat amongst the cars. Authoritarian leaders give more direction and clarity to people's work and accomplish more in a shorter period. For example, a manager giving instructions to new employees might adopt an authoritarian style to keep the focus on the task and make it clear what everyone's task is. That is a faster approach than, say, being democratic and asking for input. Input might not be necessary at that time. Similarly, professors can adopt an authoritarian style when giving out an assignment. They make it clear what needs to be done. There's not a lot of back and forth debating the assignment, aside from questions. Generally, the rules are the rules. On the negative side, it fosters dependence, submissiveness, and a loss of individuality. While authoritarian leadership has its time and place, if you're under an authoritarian leader for too long, followers can become discontent and hostile. So here are those positives, and here are the negatives. So this is an activity we're going to do in class. Take a moment and think about it so that you can interact. Okay, let's look at democratic leadership style. A democratic leadership style echoes the assumptions in Theory Y. Democratic leaders guide followers rather than directing them. They do not emphasize role hierarchy like authoritarian leaders. Instead, they try to speak on the same level as their followers. Listening to followers is a priority. They promote communication among group members and give suggestions without seeming to give orders or apply pressure. What are the positives? With this type of leadership, you have greater group member satisfaction and commitment. There's more friendliness, mutual praise, and group-mindedness. It results in stronger worker motivation and greater creativity. For instance, a store manager with a democratic style might take the time to ask sales associates for recommendations on store displays. Or a professor with this style might ask students for suggestions or input on lecture topics or what they want to learn. You can get more commitment and buy-in that way. But the downside of democratic leadership is that it takes more time and commitment from the leader. It's not always feasible to adopt this style. Our third style is laissez-faire leadership. Laissez-faire translates to allow to do or let it be. The laissez-faire leadership style is dissimilar to both Theory X and Theory Y. This type of leader doesn't try to control or nurture their followers. Instead, this style is almost a non-leadership style. The leader aims to have minimal influence and is quite laid back. They don't try to influence their followers. They let it be. In an ineffective version of laissez-faire, a leader abdicates the responsibility of their role. They withdraw from followers and offer little guidance or support. This results in lower productivity, cohesiveness, and satisfaction. You might see this with a supervisor who is either incompetent, close to retirement, or close to being laid off. I've been under laissez-faire leadership before, and it's tough. I once started a job where the leader was so hands-off that I had to beg for clear expectations and guidance, and look to other coworkers to help me. It felt like I was set up to fail, but in an odd way, because it was clear that my boss didn't seem to be monitoring me at all. It was incredibly frustrating. If you are dealing with effective laissez-faire leadership, The idea is that the leader provides guided freedom, meaning that they offer support and advice when asked, but provide a great deal of autonomy and only participate in decision-making when asked or when it is deemed necessary. There's a time and a place for laissez-faire style. For instance, a leader observing group deliberations or research manager allowing employees to work on product designs without his or her input. That hands-off perspective allows for a lot of freedom, but it's best applied in small doses in specific situations. So this is a giant chart that you need to be looking at in your text. And so when you do look at your text, think about how the three styles differ, because this is a comparison of those styles. You can see that a democratic leader is involved and works with their followers. There's a dialogue. An authoritarian leader commands the room and sets the course with little input. And a laissez-faire leader will leave it up to the followers and may actively avoid talking or interacting with the followers. Think about your past leaders, good and bad. Can you pinpoint their behaviors under any of these styles? This table is a compilation of research on leadership styles. I find it helpful because it helps you see there are positives and negatives to each style. While research on democratic style is overwhelmingly positive, remember it takes time to implement and it isn't always feasible. Here we see authoritarian leadership can be helpful with large groups and simple tasks, but can increase aggression from followers and increase employee turnover. Laissez-faire style usually isn't implemented properly. So if employees feel like a leader with this style is absent or has abdicated their position, it decreases motivation, satisfaction, and creates a sense of isolation. However, when done right, this style can be great for really self-motivated experts are satisfied and motivated when left alone. So I want to show you an example of leadership in action. This is Yvon Chouinard. He is an avid sportsman and started selling climbing gear out of his car and eventually founded the Patagonia company in 1973. The company sells clothing, outdoor equipment, and travel gear and has a sales volume of about $540 million per year. Chouinard didn't want to be an executive and molded the company to value teamwork and camaraderie like a mountaineering team. Here are some examples of the company culture. No dress code. You can be barefoot. Surf when you want. They have a daily surf report displayed in the lobby. Flex time policies, company outdoor trips, healthy cafeteria food, subsidized on-site daycare, generous leave of absence policies. Open offices. No one has an office. This is a way to promote a more egalitarian workplace and have managers and higher-ups be available. Clearly, people want to work there. On average, some 900 people apply for every open position. Additionally, the company has a big commitment to the environment. Its corporate philosophy is do no harm. They try to make decisions that are sustainable and good for the environment. For instance, when the company found that chemicals used for the cotton in their clothing was incredibly harmful, they switched to organic cotton. The company encourages customers to send damaged clothes in for repair rather than buying new ones, and 1% of sales goes to environmental causes. Now that we have a feel for the company, how does Chouinard lead? He says he uses his MBA theory, management by absence. He travels and tests products on adventures around the world and is very hands-off. He's known for leaving other people in charge and leaving for months at a time. In terms of communication, he explained that most effective leaders communicate face-to-face. He doesn't email or even own a cell phone, and seeks collaborative agreements. He would ask employees to challenge decisions, work as a team, find best solutions, and he considers himself an equal to others. He says doing otherwise would damage the democratic process. Here are some examples of his leadership thoughts. The best democracy exists when decisions are made through consensus. Decisions based on compromise often leave the problem not completely solved, with both sides feeling cheated or unimportant. When you have a lot of independent people working for you, you can't tell them what to do, or you will get a passive-aggressive response. Instead, you have to build a consensus. The worst managers try to manage behind a desk. The only way to manage is to walk around and talk to people. Now that we have a feel for what Chouinard thinks and how he behaves as a leader, consider these questions. What leadership philosophy does Chouinard most likely follow? What type of leadership style do you see in Chouinard's behaviors? How effectively do you think Chenard's MBA philosophy might work in other organizations? Do you agree that consensus is critical in organizational decision making? What advantages or disadvantages do you see in leading the way Chenard does? These are questions we're going to start class with. We're going to work through them together in small groups, so be prepared to answer these questions. Now let's look at followership. When we define leadership, we talked about it as a process with both leaders and followers involved. With what we've learned so far in this class, we know that effective leadership isn't just about the leader. It also depends on the situation and the people involved. Given this, it is interesting that most leadership texts don't focus much on followers. Leaders and followers work together to meet shared objectives. So we shouldn't overemphasize leaders at the expense of not studying followers. Companies don't just succeed because of leaders. You need the hard work and to have the commitment of followers. At some point, you will be a follower. You can also switch from a follower or leader role in an organization. People switch back and forth. Some leaders are followers half the time. Some followers are leaders some of the time. So you could be a team lead on one project, but not on another. Leaders have more influence and responsibility for the direction of the group, while followers are more involved in implementation plans and carrying out the work. Sorry, I said that on an up note. Leaders have more influence and responsibility for the direction of the group, while followers are more involved with implementation plans and carrying out the work. Also, people shift in these roles. For example, a student in the classroom will follow the professor but be the leader of a small group. A leader in one organization might be a member in another. Recognize that you can learn to lead by following and learn to follow by leading. Followers, like leaders, need to understand their communication styles and orientations to be successful. There are multiple systems or typologies that look at followership. Some focus on level of engagement, some on productivity and job satisfaction, etc. We're going to focus on Robert Kelly's research on exemplary followership, which you can see on the left in this slide. Kelly identified components that make up follower styles by asking people in interviews and focus groups to describe the best, worst, and typical followers. He found followers differ on two dimensions: independent and critical thinking, i.e. being mindful of what's going on and what needs to be done to help the organization, and active engagement, i.e. the initiative to get things done. The best followers think independently and take initiatives. The worst followers have to be told what to do and require constant supervision. Typical followers take direction and complete jobs themselves after being told the expectations. Let's look at the 5 follower styles that emerge from these two dimensions. At the top left of our image, we have alienated followers. These followers are independent thinkers, but for some reason they don't participate in helping the organization. They put most of their energy into fighting the organization and not getting things done. An alienated follower might be disillusioned with leaders or feel unappreciated. Generally, they're cynical and not helpful, but sometimes good to have because they offer skepticism. An example of an alienated follower might be a student who is the class critic and sits in the back and constantly mutters about the class and the teacher. In the workplace, it could be someone who's bitter, maybe passed over for a promotion. If you look to the bottom right of the grid, you'll see the conformist followers. These followers are committed to the organization and are very active, but they don't think independently. Often busy, works hard, but doesn't critically think about what they're doing, or if they do, they don't voice that thinking. You've heard of yes men or yes women, the kind of people who hold back ideas out of fear or deference for their leader. Those are conformists. They avoid conflict and don't question orders. They're very loyal to the boss. In the middle are pragmatists. They are sometimes called survivors. Someone with this style is moderately independent and engaged. The key is they shift their follower style to suit each situation. You can see that by how their square touches all 4 parts of the grid. This shifting of style is how they cope with organizational uncertainty. For example, the frequent changes in leadership or layoffs or restructuring. Someone enacting this type of style tends to hold on to their job, but they're unlikely to be promoted. In the bottom left is the passive style. With this style, a person doesn't think independently and doesn't take action. Another term for this is the sheep style. People using this style rely heavily on the leader's direction and meet the bare minimum of expectations. They do their work but stop at that. They don't show initiative. This style can stem from having a lack of skills. Maybe you know don't know how to do something beyond your main tasks, or a lack of motivation. Maybe you don't want to do anything else. But this passive style is not always the fault of the follower. It could be that they're under an authoritarian leader or in a blame-oriented, micromanaging culture. They learn to be a sheep. I've saved the best for last with the exemplary follower or the star follower. In this style, a person is both an independent thinker and an active participant. They contribute ideas and go above expectations. Those are the most effective followers. Remember, these are just followership styles. They don't define the person. They are the role a person adopts. You might exhibit an exemplary style in a job you're passionate about, but if you're in a workplace or under a leader that you aren't happy with, you might take on a different style. Research shows that effective followers tend to also be effective leaders. That makes sense because if we think of leadership as a process, it works best when both leaders and followers are actively engaged in employing critical thinking. Specifically, research shows that effective followers demonstrate 3 skills or values. 1, they add value to the organization by helping it reach its objectives. They understand what needs to be done, develop skills to carry tasks out, and do the tasks. 2, they weave a web of relationships throughout the organization. They connect with others throughout the organization. 3, finally, they operate from an ethical viewpoint and are willing to speak up or disobey orders if unethical practices occur. We'll learn about this more in other chapters. So here's a thought activity that we'll try to bring up in our next class. Based on your past experiences, how do leader communication styles affect your performance as a follower? What can leaders do to promote exemplary followership? So here are our study guide questions again. We've covered a lot of content today. Take some time to answer the study guide questions in your notes. And also think about how this material applies to your life. All of us have a philosophy of leadership based on beliefs about human nature and work. That philosophy influences our leadership style. Understanding our philosophy, our styles of leadership, and our styles of followership can make us more informed and effective leaders. Thanks a lot. I can't wait to see you in class. I hope you have a great day. Bye.